What is up, everyone? Thank you for listening to the third episode of Not That Bad, a movie podcast hosted by me, Gabriel Tice, and my great co-host, Connor McCarthy.
Hello, everybody.
Connor sounds so enthusiastic, and I just sound I feel like I sound so tired compared to
you. Don't worry. We'll bring the energy up, I'm sure, throughout the episode.
Yeah, because we're talking about a movie that inspires a lot of passionate responses. Now, you all know this because you saw the title of the episode, but we're talking about Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood, or some people call it Jason versus Carrie.
Very common alternate title, just like our last episode that has Child's Play, Look Who's Talking. This one also referred to very, very often as Jason versus Carrie.
Yeah, and by both fans and detractors alike. So you guys have probably noticed that we're doing a pattern. We're talking about these sequels, these slasher sequels. That's not going to be the only thing we talk about. In fact, I think our next episode we're doing something a little different.
We are.
Slasher sequels are so good for this podcast because people tend to dismiss sequels a lot without really giving it a fair shot. At least that's been my experience as somebody who doesn't hate sequels or hate the idea of sequels. I think it can be a lot of fun to turn a movie into a franchise, especially in this genre space with these kinds of movies. So I don't know. This was my pick, or was it your pick, Connor? I think we both like.
So yeah, when we were first coming up with the idea for this podcast, we talked about this is one of the first movies that we discussed potentially doing. It was my pick this time around, so I was happy to have this as my pick. The next few picks that I have will be a little bit more questionable, so I wanted us to have one that we both agreed on to throw in there, and I'm so excited to talk about it. It's one that I've been itching to talk about since we started our podcast, so pumped to get into it.
Now, we knew that we wanted to talk about Friday the 13th, a movie in this series, because it has a couple of movies that would be good for this podcast.
Absolutely.
There are a couple of black sheep in this franchise. And I like to say the only Friday the 13th movie that is as bad as people say is Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. That's the only one. Every other one I could defend. But this is the one where the ratio of unfair hate to genuine merit, I think, is kind of tipped the most. Like, I don't know about you, but I always liked this movie, and I was really surprised to see the level of animus that it inspired.
Yeah, first of all, you're earning brownie points with me before we even get started because you're shitting on Part 8, and I'm all about that. The Friday the 13th is such an interesting one because I feel like if you didn't grow up with the movies, or if you're sort of a late bloomer when it comes to Friday the 13th, in fact, I have a very good friend who is very much into film, very much loves horror movies, hates Friday the 13th, doesn't like any of them. And I think that's, you either love it or hate it, but the one thing that I've never understood is how certain movies in the franchise can garner so much hate from the fan base themselves. Because, all of them have a charm and all of them have things about it that are not very good. And that's every movie from the first one all the way until the remake in 2009. So I was genuinely shocked to see how much hate Part 7 gets. I couldn't believe that it stands out as one of the worst in the franchise. I didn't get it. And it makes me really excited to discuss some of the things that people don't like about it, some of the things that we saw consistently later on in the show.
Yes, and we're going to get into all of that. Now, for those of you who have heard our first two episodes, we have a structure. We talk the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll talk about what we like about the movie in question, then what we don't like about it, then we'll address the criticisms, because every movie we talk about, there's going to be a kind of consensus set of criticisms lobbied against it. So that's where we'll address it. But we'll go ahead and jump into the good because both me and Connor have a lot to say on this topic. So, Connor, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, so with some of the pros, I just want to get started on one that I think a lot of people would agree with, but I don't think they would agree with the whole point. Um, I think Jason is great in this movie. I think most people think this is one of his best looks in all of the franchise. That's where I think people can really agree with it. But I saw a lot of reviews saying that Jason was a little bit more bland in this one, and it was a little bit more tired, which we're going to get into sort of the formulaic things a little later that we saw consistently in terrible reviews. However, Jason looks cool. He's got probably the best look. It could be the best portrayal for me. Honestly, in the entire franchise, I think this was Kane Hodder's first appearance as Jason, if not one of his appearances, and I think he does a tremendous job. And I think there's a lot of really cool moments with Jason in this movie. I mean, the kills I think were a little watered down, and I'll get into that a little bit with my cons. But there's this really cool moment that I wanted to highlight where one of the characters is walking through the house, the little cabin that they're in, and the lightning strikes and you see Jason hiding in one of the corners of the room. Just such a cool thing, something that's so out of place for a Friday the 13th movie. I feel like, he's a bit of a stalker, but I feel like it's in a different way. And it just highlights why I think this is probably the best Jason, and it could be the best Jason in the franchise. What say you about that? And let's get into some of your pros as well.
Hey, that was going to be my first pro too. I love Jason in this movie. It was Kane Hodder's first portrayal of Jason. And that's usually one good thing that people have to say about this, no matter who you are. Kane Hodder, his first appearances here, and he's great. He's not my favorite Jason. He does benefit from having played him the most. I do really love the actor who played him in part 4, Ted White. But Kane Hodder, he makes a great case for himself here, and he is aided by one of the most badass makeup jobs, not only in this franchise, but I think any slasher franchise. When Jason gets the mask ripped off, it's a big moment because he loses his iconic mask, but the face underneath makes that moment so much more compelling. And then when you watch it, you'll notice Kane Hodder's mannerisms. He really is putting on a performance here, the way he kind of snarls, and like you can just tell he's pissed off, and there's more personality to him. So I don't agree at all that this is a bland version. I would say that kind of rolls over into my next positive, that I think in general this is just a really creative slasher movie. It's not the most subversive. It doesn't entirely escape the tropes, and some segments I do think feel a little tired. We'll get into that.
Right.
But between the core premise and the new kind of version of Jason, which is a full zombie Terminator Jason, like he's more like a movie monster than a slasher villain, which I love. I just like that the director, John Carl, I think Bachler.
I have no idea how to pronounce this. I feel so terrible because
I love checked him before I started this podcast.
I couldn't find the steady pronunciation. So
yeah,
I didn't know if it's Buchler or, I don't know what it is, but
Bueller
could be
Bueller.
Bueller.
Yeah. But the director, he's on record for having said that he did not want to do Friday Part 7. He thought it was hubris to do 7 movies. So he took it upon himself to come up with anything to make this feel fresh and still fun and still fit in the slasher mold. And I think he did a great job.
Yeah, and I think he did a good job of keeping it. I mean, there are definitely elements that some people feel are out of place within the Friday the 13th franchise, but a good amount of the movie still feels like a Friday the 13th film. And it doesn't feel like it's reinventing the wheel, but it also doesn't feel like too much of a rehash for me. And I had that down as well, that not only some of the kills were creative, but some of the moments I felt like were done in a pretty creative way to freshen up the franchise. And, when you talk about freshening up the franchise, you have to take into account the story, which I actually have as a pro. I think the character of Tina, it feels like a pretty good threat to Jason. She has a pretty good arc throughout the movie, in my opinion. I felt like her story, from the beginning to end, she has good motivations. She has a reason to sort of fear these abilities that she doesn't really know how to harness. And on the other hand, she's also, unbeknownst to her from the beginning, being manipulated into having these experiences and continuing with these, sort of abilities that she has. It's an example of sort of the right way to make something different, because now you actually have somebody who it makes sense is both kind of a formidable foe for Jason, but also feels vulnerable because she doesn't have full control over this and she doesn't really know what she's doing. And she just kind of came into her own with these little abilities that she has. But at the same time, she still can reasonably whoop this dude's ass without even touching him. So I felt the story was a great way to freshen it up. I know a lot of people feel it's out of place. Is it out of place in the franchise? I guess a little bit, but we're talking about a franchise where the last movie, Jason was electrocuted back to life from his grave.
And that's a movie that people love, by the way,
and
including
me included. It's my favorite in the entire Friday the 13th franchise is the one that came just before this. So what I'd like to have seen them take a direction where they kept some of the humor and some of the wink wink at the audience that they had in the previous entry. I absolutely did. I think they went way too far into the serious direction. But I think it was a great way to freshen up the story in a franchise that has never been super rich on story. That's just my opinion. But what say you about the story of the movie, like the overall sort of?
Yeah, I was gonna talk more about this in the ugly section, because the premise is the most controversial thing about this movie, and it's kind of like a make or break deal. Like, if you can't get on board with this telekinetic girl facing off against Jason, then yeah, you're not going to like this movie at all. Mm-hmm. Now, I think once you get into the seventh entry of a franchise, especially in a franchise that didn't take itself that seriously throughout, I know people consider those first 4 Friday movies to be kind of like gold standard slasher, but if you look at them critically, they are winking at the audience. They are doing things that might be considered ridiculous, but hey, it's the logic of the movie. These are fun movies, and the directors are usually more interested in setting up, great set pieces, exciting moments, and etc., than like being grounded and realistic. So that being said, it's a nuanced thing for me where I see the complaints, I acknowledge them, but I am really glad that we don't have another just chase between a hapless girl and Jason. I'm glad that we have a completely different kind of showdown at the end. And it's exciting. I mean, those last 20 minutes are like one of the best kind of stretches of Friday the 13th that you're going to find, I think.
I agree. I really like the ending of this. I think it's done very well. I think there's some parts that would do better. And honestly, this is going to surprise some people for me to say this, but I think this movie would benefit more than a lot of others in the franchise of just having a straight remake. I think modern technologies and effects and the way that, we make movies now would be a lot more kind to a film like this, which I will get into a little bit once we talk about some of the cons. But the ending of this movie is so cool. I mean, there's so many cool moments. So many, in my opinion, landmark moments for the franchise. Maybe that's just me. I like some of the later sequels more than I like some of the beginning movies. So, I thought it had a lot of really cool moments, and the end is another good pro. It just has a lot of really cool shit in there, and I think it's one of the better finales of the franchise, and I'll stand by that.
Yeah, I mean, just think of all the great moments that happened there, right? I love when she ties him up with those vines and electrocutes him in that puddle. I love when she makes the roof fall down on him and he just kind of busts out. Because again, Jason's like a monster in this. And
yes,
if he was just a regular human being, this would not be a fight at all. But it's like, even more than Carrie, I think of Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader,
Yeah.
because she's basically using the Force the whole time, and I think that's really dope when you look at it that way.
She's a modern Jedi.
She's a Jedi. And Jason, instead of a lightsaber, he has a machete. You know.
He does. Yeah, that's the interesting way to look at it. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, I think it's all about perception. Like, if you go in with the right mindset, this movie is just not only fun. I actually do care about what's going on, and you kind of alluded to this, but another big positive for me, I actually really like Tina, and I like not all the characters. We'll get into it, but I like a few key characters surrounding her. First, I think she does have a pretty interesting kind of tragic backstory, and she's not just Carrie, just because she's a teenage girl with telekinesis. Like, let's be real, that doesn't just make her Carrie. She has her own story and her own motivations.
Yeah.
I really like the boyfriend that she gets. And am I alone in that? I never see anybody talk about him, but I thought he's a really nice guy.
I'm totally with you. And I just have to say this, and this is going to sound really strange, but like, I think when that actor was a little older, they should have like had him audition for some sort of Superman part, because he's got that like kind of face,
He's got a
that
great
you could kind of
Christopher
see.
Reeve kind of vibe.
Yeah, it's a vibe that I'm getting. And he's not like, it's not like he's a shining beacon of acting, and nobody is in a find me one example of just an Oscar worthy performance in a Friday the 13th movie.
You're not counting Kevin Bacon.
Well, no, Kevin Bacon does not deliver an Oscar worthy performance in Friday the 13th.
No. I think
he'll get into that later on.
Yeah, the best performance is Betsy Palmer in all of these movies. Corey Feldman, kind of, and Crispin Glover, definitely in terms of entertainment value, are there. But if you're actually talking about like a dramatic performance by a seasoned actor, it's Betsy Palmer, and then kind of downhill after that, even though I think there are plenty of good performances in these movies.
Yeah, and it's funny because I don't really love the first Friday the 13th movie personally. It's very far down my ranking in the franchise, but I think she delivers by far the best performance, and it makes her, it makes the movie way better than it would have been. I mean, it would have been near the bottom, like literally near the bottom, if it wasn't for her.
Well, here's the problem, and we're talking about a completely separate movie, but this is something I have to get off my chest as a fan of these movies. It was such a mistake to just keep her in the last 20, 30 minutes of the first movie. Like, they didn't have her on screen until the very end, basically. That was such a mistake because she was the best performer. She had a really interesting little backstory set up, and instead of trying to do a lame ass whodunit, like one of the worst whodunits in movie history, in my opinion, they could have like had a really great twist, right? Where sweet Mrs. Voorhees, oh my God, you've been the killer the whole time. So that's just me ranting about the first movie. They probably couldn't afford to get Betsy Palmer for the whole movie.
Right.
I'm guessing that's it. But it's like, imagine if Donald Pleasance was only in the last 20 minutes of Halloween. That's kind of how it feels for me.
Yeah, I know why they kept her. I know why they did what they did. I think, like you said, it doesn't work as well as they wanted it to work. But the one thing that I will say is, like, I think they should have done whatever necessary to just get her to do like help some characters out throughout the movie, and like be that like sweet old lady, so that when it's revealed that she is the killer, I would have even been cool with like sort of like a split personality type thing, where she kind of like snaps in and out of like being this nurturing motherly character. I think it would have been, I mean, she could have delivered anything to them. And I'm just kind of sad that it didn't go that way. And it's always added to my not so high enjoyment of the movie, is that I think she's just kind of wasted. I like the fact that they saved the killer till the end, but there should have been more of her throughout the movie. And like you said, it could have been a budget thing, but in this one, I mean, again, is Tina or any of the actors, are any of them going to give you an Oscar worthy performance? Absolutely not. But that's not what you came here for. And if you came to a Friday the 13th movie expecting an Oscar-worthy performance, I'm sorry, but you probably need to get your head checked. More so than I need to get my head checked for some of the opinions that I spew out on this podcast. So it's Tina did a great job. And it's funny that we're praising Tina in this movie after shitting, well, not necessarily shitting on Tina in episode 1, but
I was
another it was another Tina that's
Yeah.
hated. So that's a good connection back to our first episode. But I thought she was the most interesting thing about the movie.
Yeah, and then a huge thing she has going for her, though, I really, really like the dynamic she has with her psychiatrist, played by the guy who's he's Bernie.
That fucker's Bernie. Yeah. He's fucking Bernie. I couldn't believe that. I was like, where do I know this guy from? I was like, holy shit, this guy's Bernie.
Yeah, and he's a pretty convincing scumbag. But I was actually impressed that they didn't lay it on too thick. Like he's smug the whole time, but I think he still plays it with enough restraint that he comes across like credible. Because in a movie like this, a lot of times, people of authority are so slimy that you're wondering, like, why are you entertaining this asshole? Like, it's very clear that you're dealing with a nefarious character. And this guy, it was a little more, not ambiguous, because we, the audience, know, but I bought the situation of the movie. I bought that they were in this relationship. And just, he's a really great, in addition to Jason, you should have another kind of antagonist, somebody who challenges the hero on a more personal level. Because that's not what Jason really does. He doesn't have a personal relationship with most of his victims. So I'm glad that they had a figure like this sleazy doctor. I think he filled that role really well.
Yeah, he was almost like this side villain, but he didn't feel fully like a villain, like he had his motivations to do what he did. He was still a slime ball, and you still kind of wanted to see him get his comeuppance, but he didn't take away from Jason at all. And that's something that some franchises will sort of get away from, where that side villain, and one of them is Texas Chainsaw Massacre, one that I'm a big fan of. I think certain times in that franchise's history, the side characters have been more interesting than Leatherface
all the time, honestly.
So I think one of them always overshadows ever since the first one. I think the first one was really the Leatherface show for me. I really like how he is in part 2 through, I like him through most of them, but there's always a character on the side that kind of feels like they're overshadowing. And I was worried the first time I watched this film a couple of years ago that this would be the same thing with Terry Kaiser as the doctor. But I think he did a great job without overshadowing. And it's not like an Oscar-worthy performance or anything, but I thought it was a really good way to take his character. I thought he played it very well. And and he didn't take anything away from the killer, he did his job. I mean, that's what your job is. Make an impactful performance without overshadowing the killer. Yeah. But I do want to say too, like, I really wish that they would have taken the route of making him more of like a universal monster, because I think that's what they started in Jason Lives. I think they did a great job with it, and they continued it into this one. But then they went a whole terrible another direction. So I think this movie and Jason Lives are a good example of like how he was sort of like, this was like the thing that would make him different, it was like making him a modern universal monster type thing. And I think they missed the boat in the future. I want to add that as a pro in this. It still feels like he's kind of like like you said, a modern monster for the time.
Yeah, totally. And Jason's gone through a lot of changes.
Oh yeah.
Let's just call him that. He's been to hell, he's been to space, he's fought Freddy. And that's all well and good. But this and part 6, to me, they're actually very much like a duology.
I agree.
In this era. And hey, I love part 6, so that is not a bad thing.
Yeah, agreed. I think that wraps up our pros, and I think it's time for the bad.
The bad, yeah. And there is actually, on my most recent rewatch, it was probably the time I enjoyed it the least. Not that I didn't like it. Not that I didn't like it. I was just, I first saw it when I was like 14 or 15, and as you mature, you just start to notice things, and then there's no shame in that. I still enjoy the movie, but yeah, there are plenty of things to call out. I guess I'll start off by saying that all of the characters that are basically Jason's victims, his cannon fodder, they're probably the worst victims up to this point.
I won't disagree with you. I think I don't know if it was as important in this film because they had such a strong story with the main character that they had to make every side character memorable. But I would probably agree that it's probably the worst batch of them for sure.
I would agree with you more, except I feel like we spend way too much time with these people, like way too much screen time.
That I will say. I'll give you that. Yes, I'll give you that.
Now, I can give them credit. It seems like they were trying, like, because all these characters are kind of weird. It makes you think the writers must have been trying to make them interesting. Like, there's the writer guy. He's like the worst of them. It's like science fiction writer.
He was the worst for sure. Like, because he crossed the line from boring to annoying. Everybody else was like on the boring side. He just annoyed the hell out of me.
Oh, for sure. And there are these two girls who are both really attracted to this dumb stoner. And this movie perpetuates a really terrible stereotype that attractive girls will throw themselves at a mediocre subpar men. That's a very dangerous stereotype. Very dangerous indeed. So I just thought, and there's like, wait, it's treated as a love triangle. Like, who's going to get the guy? And it's like, we don't care.
No, and the other thing is that it didn't even do just that stereotype. It also did the stereotype of like, oh, here's the ugly, nerdy, frumpy and lumpy one that has to get all dolled up and change herself in order to get the guy, and then she doesn't even get him. She just gets murked. So
she doesn't even look different. I swear to
God.
No,
she doesn't. She looks no different. It wasn't even like a big change or anything. She looks no different. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, and who are we missing? Okay, here's something that might be a point of contention. I don't know. Maybe I should have included this in my pros, actually.
Oh,
Melissa, how do you feel about her?
I don't hate the character.
Oh, no, actually.
I don't hate it. I mean, was every line delivered perfectly? No, I don't think so. I think there was some. They definitely could have done a few retakes with some of it, but I felt like you kind of needed that. Like, you kind of needed them because that helps fuel what happens with Tina. I mean, like, she's I think really the crazy one of the bunch, because she's literally like stalking them in the woods, right? And that's what you're talking about,
really
right?
Over the top is my only complaint.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Yeah, but then again, those rich white girls, I don't trust them.
Trust me, going to a school where there was quite a few of them, don't trust them.
Yeah, we should lock them up.
Yep, they should be in the asylum where Tina was.
No, we should have a Guantanamo Bay just for rich white girls.
Yeah, they'd go there if somebody told them their dad owned it. So
yeah,
it'd be easy to get them there.
Wow, I wonder how much hate we're gonna get for that.
I know. We just alienated the rich white girls demographic that we're going for. If anybody didn't know, that's what our podcast is for. So all the rich white girls that watch our show, I'm terribly sorry for offending you. That's our demographic. We don't want to alienate you guys. So
Ivanka Trump is tweeting about us right now, I
bet. She is pissed.
Okay, wait, what's your first negative? We haven't gotten to yours.
Yeah, so I felt like some of the serious moments in the movie that were supposed to, feel the weight of what's happening came across as very silly or laughable. Not every one of them, but there is one particular moment at the beginning of the film where we see this child character accidentally pretty much cause the death of her father. And the child actress, who, by the way, fun fact about this child actress, her name is Jennifer Banco, and she appears in another film that I'm sure will be covered at some point. I know that I will make it a pick in the future if it doesn't come up, but she's also plays the little girl character in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, also known as Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh boy, that movie.
And so
I'm gonna have to pretend. I'm gonna have to pretend to have an opinion on that. That is a movie that is like I forgot about it as soon as the credits started rolling.
Most people, that's the way it goes. I quite enjoy it, and so if we need to get into that in the future, we definitely can. But I thought it was kind of interesting that this character, and I don't think she does terrible in or she doesn't do that bad of a job in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, but she doesn't do that great either, and she definitely doesn't do great in this one. I haven't seen her later work, but it's just absolutely laughable when she does the stare and the camera zooms in on her. It's just funny to me, and I can't not laugh at it. And that happens a few times in the movie. So that's probably my biggest complaint, is I felt like this movie could have really benefited from being a little bit more modern and less of the 80s cheese that it had, because that, I think, did hurt some of the big moments in the movie. And that's the complaint that I have starting us off.
I think that's totally valid. And on one hand, my instinct is to say, well, it's a Friday the 13th movie, cut it some slack. But as we established, this movie's trying to do something a little different. It's trying to tell a more interesting story with more interesting characters. So yeah, that is a flaw. If it undermines your ability to take the movie on its own terms, it's definitely a flaw. I don't think I laughed at that moment. I just accepted it, kind of like, bad note to start on. I think the rest of the movie is okay because we don't have child actors for the rest of it, thankfully.
Yeah.
Trying to think if there were any moments that I laughed at. And I definitely think that some of those characters that we were talking about, I think how much they want us to care was laughable.
Mm-hmm.
Like some of Melissa's reactions to things were amazing.
No, I agree with you. I think some of that was played for laughs though too.
Yeah, probably. But in a movie like this, it's so hard to tell, right?
It is. Yeah, it almost feels like, how Toby Hooper says that Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the first one, has like a ton of black humor that not a lot of people recognize, which I think is true. But there are some moments that people point to as a shining example that I just don't get. And I think this is one of those examples where, like, her reactions throughout, I cannot tell if they're trying to play it for a laugh or not. Coming off of Jason Lives, I would think so, but I can't tell.
Either way. But even if they are playing it for laughs, I'm sorry, even if they are playing it for laughs, it still clashes with the rest of the tone that I think they're going for.
You're right.
Yeah. I don't know. But let's see. I think my big complaint is that there is a section of the movie where I stop caring. It's right before Tina runs into Jason out on the road, because it's just Jason dispatching of all these useless characters we talked about. And we'll get into this in the ugly section, but the kills, obviously, there are some memorable ideas, but the execution is sorely lacking for reasons we'll get into.
Yes.
So, yeah, basically, as soon as Jason enters that house and starts killing people, however long that is, I check out. And that brings the momentum to a screeching halt.
No, I'm with you. And I think, when I think I was able to remain interested personally, just because I wanted to see, and every time I'm interested in the creativity of some of the kills, or kind of comparing them to other movies. That's just something that I can't help but do when I watch something. If I start to lose interest, I get really over analytical, and I try to think like, oh, okay, could this have inspired something? Could this have been, like when the van scene happens, every time I see that, I go, well, I wonder if that inspired, part of what happened in our favorite movie, obligatory Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 reference.
I don't know what movie you're talking about. I've never seen that before.
But it's just, there's things that remind me of other movies. So I start to kind of pull up in my head, like, okay, that reminds me of this movie. That reminds me of this one. But it's definitely a moment where I reached those. That's my version of really kind of checking out during a viewing. And that's what I did, this time around. If I'm not going into a viewing saying, okay, I'm going to analyze this and break down every scene, that's how you know that I've lost interest, if I start doing that without the intention. And that was what I did both my first viewing and my most recent one. And presumably each in between. I can't even remember what I ate for breakfast this morning, so I don't remember how those went. So
Yeah, and that was the thing that really jumped out at me on this last rewatch, because I had been along for the ride on those first couple of watches, but by now that is the thing that ages the worst for sure.
I agree.
Yeah. And actually I know the moment that this starts, it starts when the ugly duckling girl, who's not even ugly, but whatever,
Yeah.
she's like, she puts her lipstick on and she kind of does that. And like from
Yep.
there until Jason versus Carrie,
Mm-hmm.
it's like I kind of hunkered down and I debate whether or not I should just fast forward. I try not to do that. I think a movie should be experienced linearly when possible, but there are times when I'm tempted for sure.
Yeah, and I'll give a little bit more credit to the movie because I think it kind of starts to get a little bit more interesting when Tina's in the woods and she learns about her mother. I think that like kind of drew me back into being interested, or that scene where like the doctor sort of sacrifices her mother. I think that kind of pulled me back away from that, because then I was like, oh shit, okay, what's gonna happen from here? First viewing, of course. Now from here, I'm like, all right, fuck that guy. Like that's a dick move, bull. That's a dick move, buddy. Like, I'm sorry. But yeah, I would agree with you. It sort of takes you out. And it's sort of like what a non-horror fan would describe Friday the 13th as. Just
Yes.
sex, boobs, characters you don't care about getting murdered by a big killer guy. That's what it is.
And I
that's
think the
least
thing that
interesting part.
actually makes it even worse than all of that is like the movie. We haven't really talked about this, but the movie tries many times to be funny and it fails 95% of the time.
Yeah.
Its sense of humor is really bad. It's
It
really
is.
juvenile. It's very, I don't know. I think it's trying to emulate kind of the wave of Brat Pack teen sex comedies.
I'd say so.
Right. But the first Friday the 13th preceded those movies.
Yes.
But this one feels like an imitator in that department.
I don't know if this will be controversial or not amongst fans. I think if it was executed a little bit better, I wouldn't have it in my con section. But one of the things that makes me laugh, and I think it takes away from the movie, I think so much of the end of the film is so cool. That showdown between Jason and Tina is so fun. I love every minute of it, except for 1 minute of it, and it's how it ends. How Jason is taken down.
Oh,
I absolutely hated it. I absolutely hated it. Poorly executed. Was it a great idea to begin with? No, but it could have been saved if it was executed better, and it absolutely was not. It makes me laugh every time. I think it's absolutely ridiculous, and I could see how somebody who already had some points against the movie going through it could see that moment and go, fuck this movie. I will never watch this movie again. And that's where I kind of started to understand some of the hate. Is some people, that's how they view movies. They come away with, the only thing they come away with is, okay, how did I feel when that movie was over? And I feel like that's a sour note to end on.
I was going to talk about this in the ugly section, but you brought it up, so let's talk about this. First off, even the director hates this ending. He's on record for hating this ending. Apparently, the dad was supposed to look like a zombie when he came out.
Huh.
I guess that would have been better.
It's a fucking failed on that note. My God.
It's another no, I think, well, he said that he wanted the dad to look like a zombie, but there wasn't the budget in the makeup department. So he looks like a regular guy, which is awesome.
With like mud on his face.
Yeah. Jason, he's a corpse, a rotted corpse, but this guy, he's like your dad or something. He looks fine.
No,
I think, look, okay, there's two ways to talk about it. I think the way I'm interested in talking about it is, what were they trying to do with that ending? They were trying to do this emotional bookend. The whole point of the movie is Tina's trauma for her father's death that she feels responsible for. And the reason she brings Jason back is because she thinks she's bringing her dad back. So I think the pieces were in place. I think they had the right ingredients to pull this off. I think it's just the execution. I think when the dad comes up and he's shouting and like his sweater doesn't even look damp. Like I swear to God, he's been staying dry under that lake. Um, and and just the kind of the ease of it, like he just wraps a chain around Jason and he kind of yanks him back, like Jason the unstoppable killing machine, versus the middle-aged man in the sweater. And well, actually, that kind of describes Freddy versus Jason. But this middle-aged man is
yes, it does. Holy
yes.
shit!
But this middle-aged man in the sweater is much less credible.
Oh, I mean, like it, and like I would have understood it if like okay, let's say for example, she ended up bringing back like a bunch of people who are dead at the bottom of this lake, right? Let's say like Camp Crystal Lake is cursed. There's a bunch of Jason's victims or something that somehow ended up at the bottom of the lake, and all these like corpses started coming up, and then the last one had some kind of visual that it was her father, and that's the one that was the final piece of the puzzle to bring Jason back under the water and finish it, right? That would have been more interesting than what they did, which was just like he had never died, like nothing had ever happened. Somehow Jason was brought back in the same form that he was before, but her father completely okay after years of being dead in the bottom of the water, which first of all, why would you not have his body retrieved? But even with that, why does he look
I didn't even
fine?
think about that. Oh my God.
He looks like if my dad fell into the water and popped back up and was like, oh, sorry, got a little mud on my face, guys. I gotta go take a shower now. It's like, what the fuck? Like, go away, suburban white dad. I don't care about you. This is a dumb ending. It makes Jason look weak as hell, which makes Tina look even weaker because she's got these mind powers and somehow could not take this fucker down. But here comes fucking Roger Diddly-Doo over here taking him down and pulling him under the water. It makes no sense to me.
And why does this immobilize Jason? Like just being dragged down?
Why? He was fighting when the rock dragged him underneath, but now this, Tom Matthews had to throw a damn boulder into the water to drag this fucker down, and now you got Gary from next door pulling this guy underwater and ending him for the entire rest of the movie. It makes no sense. And I'm talking about this like I hate this movie. I absolutely don't, and you're going to see that by the end of this that I don't hate this movie. But God, that it's such a missed opportunity for a cool ending between Tina and Jason. And I felt like it would have been better to make Tina self-sufficient by this point, because that's the whole point of this, was that she couldn't fend for herself. She had to have somebody with her doctor or her mother, and now she has neither of them, and she feels responsible for her father's death. I would have even been fine with like an Obi-Wan Force voice.
Honestly, the ending of Jason Goes to Hell is like this ending, but good.
I'm going to agree with that. I can't believe I'm going to agree with that, but I'm going to agree with that.
Now, I think we've actually found a great segue into our last segment. We're going to talk about the ugly. We're going to air out the dirty laundry and talk about the things that people hate about this movie. And to illustrate all this, let me read some handy reviews from Letterboxd.
Here we go.
Yeah, these are the people who hate the movie most.
By the way, what our overall score on Letterboxd for this film? I believe what was 2.7?
2.6.
2.6.
Yeah, let's see. Can I find a short review? Oh, these people have so much to say. Here, I'll read this one review from Dave Lester. He gave it half a star. I have discovered a Friday the 13th entry that is worse than the atrocity that was the third installment. I agree with Dave. That third movie ain't no good, in my opinion. The only reason I may put the third movie in the franchise over this one is because Jason finally dons his mask in part 3. That is such a bullshit reason to like a movie. I'm sorry. That is like, that's the only defense people have of the third movie, and I'm sick of it. Dave says, the 7th installment is same old, and is boring as a result. I disagree strongly. More kids in the woods around the lake and in cabins to get slaughtered. The difference is a woman with telekinetic powers. a Jason versus Carrie riff that is completely dumb. Okay, that's a contradiction. You can't say it's the exact same as the other movies and then say, oh, aside from that telekinetic girl, that's like makes it a categorically different kind of movie, you know?
Yeah, I do want to say though, thanks for thank you to what was it, Dave?
Dave.
Thank you to Dave for the review. I know it's not something that you did for our show, but it's something that we're using on our show, and I want to thank you for submitting it. Let's get into some of the things that we have to say about it. About the hates, I mean, about things people hate about this.
Yes. So let's see. We touched on a lot of things in our good and bad sections. I would say the big thing we haven't touched on yet that we need to talk about are the kills. Now, I'm one who kind of is a little unenchanted with kills in slasher movies. Like, I think there's way too much thought put behind creative kills and not enough behind creative storytelling, creative characters, etc. And people will say, well, it's a slasher, it's about the kills. No, a slasher movie is just a film where the villain uses some kind of bladed weapon to go after their victims. That does not mean that you have to forego any kind of structure or character. So in that way, I'm very forgiving when it comes to this category. That being said, if kills are your thing, this is not the movie for you. That's just the fact.
Yeah, I think if you're looking for creativity in kills, that's one thing. But reading over the reviews and knowing, some of the backstory behind this film, it was absolutely butchered by the MPAA. Now I think just called the MPA, whatever. I don't respect them, so I'm not going to call them anything. But
fun fact: the film school I went to was named after the head of the MPAA, Jack Valenti.
Interesting. Okay.
Because he was an alum. He was an alumni there.
Well, I can tell you that, the MPAA has not been kind to horror films over the years. In some ways, it's been kind to some of them, definitely playing favorites with a film like Evil Dead, the requel that came out with just copious amounts of blood and violence that somehow was able to make the film. But then you have,
I think that's the key.
It could be the key, but no, there is some nudity because they have that weird naked demon chick at the end.
Okay, but not sexy.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah,
that's fair. But
which I think is what they really care about.
You have movies like this, and one of the ones that had no real heavy amounts of nudity or sexual nature in it was a movie that was referenced earlier in Leatherface Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Another one that came out not around the same time as this one, but not far from it. It was a couple of years, I think 2 or 3 years between this film and that one, just completely neutered by the MPAA and their desire to just take all the fun out of our movies. Just destroyed it. They had a lot of kills that had to be dumbed down, footage that, from what I understand from reading online, doesn't seem to exist anymore of the extended version of some of these kills.
There is footage. Have you ever picked up the Shout Factory copies?
I have the Shout Factory copies. Are they deleted scenes or are they thrown back in? Okay.
Yeah,
so I just haven't seen it. So I haven't seen it yet.
When you look it up, it's actually pretty badass.
Okay. Well, I think, they should definitely do a cut of the movie where it's extended and it has those kills. I think that would add to it a lot. But having said that, I am sympathetic to a movie when it's out of their hands, what they can do with it. My only problem is, like you said, if it's a franchise known for being just a stereotypical slasher, I'll say, because I feel like now slasher films have developed this sort of stereotype of being so heavy in the kills and not so heavy in the story. And this one has a good enough story for me to carry through and forgive the sins of the NPAA of ruining a lot of the cool stuff they came up with. So if you're okay with, watching the movie with that in mind and being okay with it, there's some really creative stuff, some cool kills, some cool new weapons that are used. But I think it's not the strong point of the movie. And I was kind of upset to see so many people have it as such a huge detractor for them. Because yes, I think it doesn't help the movie, but I don't think it hurts it as much as it would in some of the earlier entries and even later entries in the franchise.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair criticism personally. especially once you know about the MPAA backstory. I
Yeah.
agree that a movie should stand on its own, and I think this movie does, for the most part. The sad thing for me is actually that they have some cool ideas that they don't get to go all the way. Like the sleeping bag kill. That's a pretty iconic
Oh
kill,
man,
but it's
so
very
cool.
underwhelming when you watch it in this movie.
Yes,
In
completely agree.
fact, it's probably because of Jason X that kill is so well remembered.
Yeah, I would say so. I feel like every time, in fact, I remember watching a couple of reviews for the Friday the 13th of 2009, which did its own kind of version of the sleeping bag kill. It
Yeah,
did its own way with it, but a lot of people said, "Oh, well, this of course is calling back to Jason X, where they had," and I was like, "Hold on, hold on a second. That's I think you mean part seven, because part seven did that first, but it's not as memorable. It was definitely done. It was definitely dimmed down, and from what I understand, that scene is one of the ones that's extended. That
very
the
much so. I
MPAA
mean,
just
it's like
completely butchered.
comical.
Yeah,
It's really
it's
comical.
it's one hit. I mean, when you watch it, you kind of go, "Oh shit, is that it?" All
Especially
right,
because I'm
well,
pretty sure he hits her by the feet. Like
yeah,
when you watch it, I mean, this might just be some poor editing, but I swear it looks like he grabs, he's like holding onto the bag by the side of the head. He's dragging
yes,
her, and then he kind of whips it around. So he would be hitting her feet. I might be
yeah.
misremembering that
No, you're
actually.
right.
I
You're
might be
right.
misremembering that. So don't quote me, and definitely don't leave upset comments if I get this wrong.
Well, you can leave an upset comment for me because I think you're right.
Okay.
I think I'm pretty sure that's what it is because I know every time I've watched the movie, as soon as he hits and then lets it go, I'm like, wait a minute, wasn't he just holding it from right there? Why is she bleeding from the head?
Either way,
I've
it's
never
it's
gotten
just
that.
not a very well executed scene, right?
Agreed.
Yeah. I also think it's really weird, like the lead up to that scene. So there are these two campers, and again, this is the movie going for some kind of laugh and just failing. The guy is some kind of weird survivalist douche, and
Yeah.
his girlfriend seems done with him. She's annoyed. She wants him to just go fuck off and get firewood. But then when he leaves, she like strips down and is waiting to seduce him. And the actress is not acting any different. She at some point she's like, "Well, come get me, you big hunk of man," and she might as well be saying like, "Fuck you, you fucking wilderness douchebag." That's
Oh, shit.
yeah. So I don't know what they were going for there, but it leaves you kind of like, huh? And then this kill happens, which is more, huh? Because of the confusion we're talking about. So it's just that's a great example of the movie kind of screeching to a halt because the kills were just compromised.
Yeah, and it's one of the negatives that like I can see when people bring it up as a negative that I understand where they're coming from. But one of the ones that I really don't understand, and we sort of talked about it a few times throughout, is one of the most consistent ones. Besides the bad acting and besides the bad characters, which we've discussed earlier, I mean, those were two things that were brought up a lot. Friday the 13th has never been known for its acting or for the acting abilities of the people that they cast in those movies. And the side characters are pretty bad. I don't think it's weighted nearly what people say it is, but the thing that I don't understand at all, the criticism that I don't get, and the criticism that I saw so commonly over the tons of reviews that I read for this movie was that it was the formula it was just very formulaic. It was tiresome. They used the same formula that every Friday the 13th film has gone through. And while I do think that they kept a lot, I think what they did keep in that was part of the Friday the 13th formula was essential to make it a Friday the 13th movie. I don't think it would have felt like a Friday the 13th film without a lot of this stuff in there. And so, on one hand, everybody sort of wants the movie to be so different, but as soon as it starts to stray from that, they get upset. But then the stuff that is the same that they can recognize, they don't like either. So, I've never understood that argument, and I don't understand why it's so prevalent amongst fans or not fans.
Yeah, it's like, do you want another movie or not? Um, if you just think that there shouldn't be that many Friday the 13th movies, that's fine. But why are you watching them still?
It's I don't get it. I mean, like, every film franchise has to have continued staples or people don't want to see it. Even some of the movies that keep some of the things that they like about it, people end up not liking, which is fine. Okay, like Rob Zombie's Halloween films, it kept a lot of the same, tropes and staples that you saw throughout the entire Halloween franchise, and people ended up hating them. And I know why they did. There's still other things that make up a movie, and I get that. But that's not what people are saying about the movie. They're not saying, oh, well, I like the Friday the 13th stuff, but all the stuff that was new and, the psychic stuff, which, again, people say they don't like, but I don't see the criticism at all that this is a tiresome formula or that they just have rehashed the same thing, because it doesn't feel like a rehash to me. It feels like a Friday the 13th movie with a lot of new stuff pasted over it. That's what it feels like to me.
I mean, the entire premise of the movie is something that these films have never attempted before. So, in this case specifically, yeah, that does annoy me. Because, and here's the thing, right? Imagine that this movie was just Jason versus Carrie. There aren't any campers to be disposed of. I would probably like it more, but I bet you people would complain even harder. That would be like a Halloween 3 situation.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, not even close, especially at that time. It felt like the 80s was so slasher crazy and so ready to they wanted those same characters. They wanted cooler moments with them. It seems like the only innovation that they wanted was with the style that some of the kills were done with, or upping some of the parts that they liked about the movies. But I don't see how that's not still a tiresome formula. I think one of the movies that has done this really well, and I'm starting to really come around to some of the changes that I didn't initially like in the franchise, but I think Nightmare on Elm Street does a pretty good job of starting somewhere and evolving the story in a way that makes it continuously more interesting, at least as you go from 1, 2, 3. Than a lot of other franchises will do in 1, 2, 3. Halloween had 1 and 2, and they go really well together. And there's some great things about both of those movies. But then they didn't want to bring back Michael Myers. Michael Myers was dead, so they did Halloween 3, and I think that scared a lot of people. So they either had to do what Friday the 13th did, which for a while was the same shit over and over until they got to Jason Lives. I feel like that's the one that sort of, well, yeah, I feel like Jason Lives is the one that sort of broke the mold for me. It made it feel more fresh watching it, even though technically it's not Jason in part 5. But it's either like Friday the 13th, where it just keeps kind of recycling the mold until you get to part 6, or it's Nightmare, who they said, okay, well, we don't want to kill the character off because that's the drawing point of our franchise. We saw how it happened with Halloween. We don't want to do that. So here's how we can evolve it. And Friday the 13th, I feel like finally reached that at part 6. And now that they've gotten past that, everybody thinks that they either did the same thing or they hate the things that they changed. So which one is it? Did they change too much, or is it the same tired formula? I just need to know. Give me a final criticism and I'll take it seriously. But until then, I don't get it.
So that's a really great segue to, I think, talk about the most controversial thing. And again, we touched on it, but
yes,
it deserves more discussion. Okay, people call it Jason versus Carrie, and when people say that, usually they are complaining. People think that's a dumb setup to bring it. I guess they think telekinesis is out of place here. I guess they don't like the fact that it is so similar to Carrie. Well, let's take these two arguments here. First off, Friday the 13th is a rip-off franchise. It was born out of the idea of ripping off other movies, Halloween. And if they want to borrow some ideas from other classic horror movies, okay. I mean, that's fine with me. And then you get to this whole thing about telekinesis and where does it fit in this franchise. Look, in the last movie, that motherfucker was dead. Jason was dead, and the way they brought him back to life was lightning. And not only did it bring him back to life, it made him literally super strong and unkillable. I guess that's a word, unkillable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd say so.
Sure. Point is, if you can accept that, I really don't want to hear that much of a fuss about some telekinetic person, some telekinetic girl. I really don't. Especially if it leads to what is one of the better set pieces in the whole franchise.
Oh yeah. Oh no, and like, you know, the thing, like I mentioned it earlier, how I would have loved for the franchise to go more of the route of like a new version of like a universal monster. I would have loved sort of like a Jason monsterverse, you know, like where we got like, okay, so here's one of the characters that we see Jason come into contact with. I would love if it was more of like a fate thing, you know, like these people are ending up at Crystal Lake now because it's fate that they're going to run into Jason. And I think that would have been pretty cool to do.
That's
but
too
even
cerebral for this time, though. This era.
no, it is.
Yeah.
It is. If somebody gave me Friday the 13th to remake, that's the direction that I would personally take with it. I know people will say what they will about the audience, but I really liked him being brought back to life through lightning because it reminded me a lot of Frankenstein. And I thought that it was a cool way to make this sort of modern monster and make him different from the other two characters. You know, with Michael Myers, he just sort of survives somehow in a coma. And with Freddy, he gets killed off, but he's essentially a dream world character.
Yeah.
So it's different.
And the difference is, sorry to cut you off.
No. That was where I was going to leave off with it. I was going to throw to you.
The difference here is the Friday the 13th movies and Jason himself specifically. And I love Jason. Give me as much Jason as you have, but he has never made sense. Right? He was a little kid that drowned. No, he survived his drowning, and he's been living on his own, and didn't think to reach out to his mother, his loving mother, but he does get pissed when she gets decapitated. So he anything goes in these movies because he has to hitchhike or take a bus or something to get to Alice's house in part 2, even though he's like mentally deficient and deformed or whatever. And then he survives getting stabbed, shots, his head sliced open, all of that. So this is a franchise rooted in the tradition of nonsense.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And I say that lovingly. And that's kind of a cool thing, actually, compared to Halloween. Like, Halloween is so narrow. It is so formulaic. Like, it's either Michael Myers in Haddonfield or it's not Halloween, even the Rob Zombie ones, as we talked about. That's Michael Myers in Haddonfield, but wait, no, he's not supposed to have a backstory. He can't be seeing visions or whatever. That's not Halloween. Friday the 13th is anarchy. It says, screw that. We're going to do whatever we want.
Oh yeah, and like real quick before I jump into this, I just want to say a fun fact that I learned the other day while watching a video about the Halloween sequels. Halloween 2 originally was actually supposed to take place many years after the first one in the city of Chicago, in a high-rise building, which I thought could have been so cool. Now I really want to see that. But anyways,
I think that would have made it much better. That's a different story, though.
Yeah, that's a different story. That's not a movie that will be eligible for the show because it's actually very beloved. But it's one that I'm a very big fan of in some ways. But I would have loved
if we ever did a show called Actually That Bad, then I would nominate that because I have a lot of feelings about that movie. But that's a different story. Sticking with Friday Part 7.
And that's fair. I would certainly be on the other side of that. But I do want to say, I thought that was a really interesting thing about it. But you're right. I mean, that's what it is. And I think there's also a silliness about the Friday the 13th movies because Jason is a child at the end of the first one, but then a grown man in the other two. I don't know. That's a little weird to me. I thought, like you said, anything is kind of possible with these movies. I think they've always been sort of silly in their premise. even since the first one, the ending is iconic, but as soon as you made a sequel, if you did something different, which they did, they just went, okay, well, are we gonna have a kid be the killer? No, let's just make him a grown man. Nobody will ask questions.
And that's why Sean Cunningham left the franchise, because he hated that idea so much.
And it didn't make any sense. And so I'm willing to suspend that disbelief and get into the other movies and appreciate them for what they are. But I don't understand why the fans why the fans of the franchise, real hardcore fans of Friday the 13th, who generally hate this movie that we're covering now, I don't see why going in that direction is so bad, or the direction that they took. Say what you want about Jason Goes to Hell. I'm sure, like I said, keep your eyes peeled, because it's definitely something that's eligible for this program. But I don't understand why it's such a cardinal sin sometimes in a franchise to just take a bit of a leap. And it doesn't always equal bad. In fact, I think Friday the 13th should have taken a leap after the first few movies, because why in the blue hell are people still going back to Crystal Lake? They know there's a killer on the loose there. They know that that people get murdered every single time they go to that. Every single time they go to Camp Crystal Lake, somebody gets murdered or somebody dies, and everybody's just like, oh, well, we're still gonna go. That's stupid.
Yeah. That's something that Part 8 tried to fix. It tried to address that.
It tried, failed. Yeah. But I mean, criticisms for Part 7, for me, there's a lot that you can justify, but it ends at saying that it's the same tired old thing. I don't get it. I will never get it. That's actually the last one I had for an audience score. And then, of course, the character of Tina, this telekinetic stuff. It's never been a problem for me. I would have loved for them to do more cool things like that as the franchise went on, instead of what we got in Part 8. And that's where it ends for me. I don't get it. I don't get the criticism.
Well, I'm glad you say that, Connor, because now we can actually start talking about some behind the scenes stuff. So,
ready to go.
Tina, Part 8. That was supposed to happen. Tina was supposed to be the protagonist in Part 8.
Really?
And the actress asked for too much money, I guess. Very BS, in my opinion. Very BS. All that Vancouver money could have been saved. Just give her a pay raise, which she deserves, I'm sure, and do a direct sequel to this. Because let me tell you what, man, this is a big problem with these movies, the Friday the 13th movies. They have a real continuity problem. I'm not just talking about the mistakes they make, which they make a lot of. Like, only 2 of these movies take place on Friday the 13th. But just the feeling of connective tissue throughout these films, because the actors don't come back. The characters don't usually come back. The rules change all the time. Even just the vibe and the atmosphere of Crystal Lake, for me, it changes a lot movie to movie. Sometimes it looks like a pristine lake. In this movie, it looks just kind of like a pond.
No, I'm with you. I think it's a big problem I have from first movie to the last one. It's just like they don't even try in some of them to make it look consistent.
Right. Because they were shooting in different places. So yes. If they had done a direct sequel, that would have gone a long way for me. I would have been like, sweet, we have our entry point in Tina. Now we don't have to spend so much time setting up new characters, which,
yes,
like Part 8, it's like all set up, just like just this throwing characters at the screen for Jason to kill, basically. So that's another interesting behind the scenes thing. But I think the big thing, and I think people know this, is that this was supposed to be Freddy versus Jason. Were you aware of that?
No, I was always under the impression that Freddy versus Jason was supposed to kick off after Jason Goes to Hell, and I knew it went through several story versions of it, but I thought that was the first semblance of that.
Yeah, no, this is so interesting, right? So Adam Marcus cleared this up for me. So the famous thing at the end of Jason Goes to Hell is Freddy's glove comes out and pulls down Jason's mask.
Yeah,
You would assume that was a studio idea to set up for Freddy versus Jason. No, that was Adam Marcus's idea. And that gave New Line the idea to put Freddy versus Jason in motion because they had Jason by that point. But I read that originally Paramount was going to try to team up with New Line to do Freddy versus Jason. It's kind of hard to verify that. I've read that in a few sources, but I don't see much documentation behind it, so it might be a myth. But I've even heard story concepts, terrible story concepts. Would you like to hear?
Is there one of them? Is one of them? So this is just for this version of it, right? Not the one that would later go on to be made after Jason Goes to Hell, or is that? Are we including that in the terrible?
No, I mean, I think people have been writing scripts for Freddy versus Jason for so long.
Yeah.
But the scripts they commissioned for what would have been this version, late 80s. The one that I saw said that Freddy would have been one of Jason's camp counselors and that he molested him. Trigger warning. That was going to be Jason's motivation for trying to kill Freddy Krueger. That would have been the most tasteless shit.
Oh man, that's very bad. That's very terrible, very, very bad.
And I know a lot of people complain about the plot in Freddy versus Jason, but man, it is way better than that.
It's not even close. That would have been the worst possible version of that movie, in my opinion.
Yes. And I think another version I heard would have been them competing in hell to take the most souls.
Yeah, I'm actually a little bit more familiar with this one. This is the one that I've heard most about. From what I understand, this version that you discussed would have been after Jason Goes to Hell, and that would have played in with that title. So Jason gets killed, goes to hell. Freddy Krueger is, of course, in hell after the final Friday, and the devil tells them that one of them can live on to reign in the real world if they collect the most souls. So it's like a competition. He sends them both back up to Earth to do their thing, and then at the end of like a time period, I don't know if it was a couple of days, if it was whatever it was, but whoever had who claimed the most souls for the devil would have been able to live on. And then, of course, because both of them are in competition, there would have been a point where they have a battle. I think that would have been the climax in the movie, from what I understand. And I think I need to get my head checked for this, but I'm really intrigued to see what that would have looked like.
Not better than the actual movie we got.
No, not better, but I really would have liked to have seen what this would have looked like, because I think there's a movie that I really, really love that's not eligible for the show, but it's a movie called Legend, and it's a fantasy film that stars Tim Curry and Tom Cruise and Mia Sara.
Yes,
big
Legend movie.
Big fan of the movie Legend. If I think like a character, the character of Darkness in Legend, played by Tim Curry, is this big devil looking character, and I think something like that could have been a cool way to like have a character that looks somewhat like that in that Freddy versus Jason concept. I think that would have been really cool. That's the only way it would have worked for me, though. If it was this like some guy, like Little Nicky, a Little Nicky version of the devil would have been really lame. But no, I think we got the right version. But that's really interesting. I did not know that this was supposed to be Freddy versus Jason in its first form. I think that's really interesting. Terrible concept, but very interesting way to go about it.
Yeah. Now let me say this too, touching back on something. So if you are willing to accept the idea of Jason fighting a dead man who kills people in their dreams, then I don't think you have any room to complain about him fighting a telekinetic person.
I mean,
just my opinion.
And well, if they exist in the same universe anyways, we know that like it's possible for people to contain these powers. I know some of it's within like the dream world and stuff, but like that's like the whole point of like 3 through 5. in Nightmare on Elm Street. So like it's not completely out of the question that there would be this supernatural things at play, especially considering, like we said, in the same franchise that that part 7 is in, the guy gets brought back to life by lightning and ages what 10 or 20 years in less than a year. So it's like, I don't know, but that's really interesting. I never knew about that. Did you have any more facts about the movie you wanted to share? Because I actually surprisingly did a little bit of research this time and have some completely useless facts to share with everybody once you're done.
No, we're starting a new segment. It's called Useless Info. So Connor, start us off. Useless info. Let's go.
Let's go with some useless info for this movie. So one of the things that I found really interesting in my research is actually Lar Park Lincoln, who's the star of the film, plays Tina. This is actually her second film with Kane Hodder. She played the role of Kate in the movie House 2, The Second Story, where Kane Hodder played the character of Gorilla. So I thought that was kind of interesting that they appeared in the same film together. But she would also go on to appear in the Freddy's Nightmares television series, which also saw Halloween 5 alum and online buddy of mine, Tamara Glynn, make an appearance. So connection back to our first film that we talked about, Halloween 5, Tina would go on to be in the Freddy Krueger television series with Tamara Glynn. Tamara's a very nice person, and I liked her role in Halloween 5. But interestingly, there's more connections to Halloween 5 with this movie. Director John Carl, I'm going to go with Buechler. Tell me I'm wrong. That's fine. I will probably be wrong. Would also go on to appear alongside a Halloween 5 alumni when he played the character of Jack Cracker in Hatchet 2 with Scream Queen and personal longtime celebrity crush, sorry to my wife, Danielle Harris. And Danielle Harris, of course, taking the role over in that second movie. And coincidentally, we talked earlier about Jennifer Blanco appearing in both this movie and Leatherface Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Hatchet 2 has R.A. Mihailoff. R.A. Mihailoff? I don't know how that's pronounced, but he played Leatherface in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 with Jennifer Blanco. So I thought that was really interesting. A lot of connections between these movies that I really had to stretch for. But the director, John Carl Buechler, also did the makeup for Halloween 4 alongside Wayne Toth, which not a lot of people know about, which is really, really cool. And both this character and Halloween 5 have a hated character named Tina. And all three of our first episodes covering Halloween 5, Child's Play 3, and now New Blood all have beloved predecessor that's considered to be one of the fan favorites in the franchise, but are hated or forgotten about themselves. Of course, with this film, we have Jason Lives, often regarded as one of the best Friday the 13th films. In the case of Halloween 5, we have Halloween 4, one of the most beloved entries in the franchise, and Child's Play 3, of course. Child's Play 2, for a lot of people, is ranked above the first one for some people.
For sure.
So, yeah, it's really interesting that we kind of followed this like linear path, and there's a lot of connections between the movies. And of course, I had the useless fact that Terry Kaiser was also, or Dr. Cruz in this movie was also Bernie from Weekend at Bernie's.
That's not really a useless fact at all. I'm going to use that every day.
Well, yeah, I mean, I definitely do the Bernie dance every day, but
yeah.
I don't know if I'll use the info. I just thought that was kind of interesting. A lot of connections between the movies that we've covered so far, even though I had to stretch for quite a few of them. So there's the useless facts of this episode.
What that makes me think of is that this movie should have actually not been a crossover with Freddy. It should have been a crossover with Weekend at Bernie's.
Yes.
They go to a weekend resort. Jason kills Bernie. They have to pretend Bernie's still alive. But Jason keeps killing people, and now they have to pretend that the whole party is alive. They have to like do the marionette thing for everybody. And God,
listen to me. It is an absolute crime against humanity that you and I are not in charge of making these movies, because the world of horror movies and movies as a whole would be so much more fun if we had a Jason versus Weekend at Bernie's mashup. I need this movie to happen, and I want this message. I'm going to look right into the camera when I say this. I need this movie to happen. I don't care what it takes. Recast Bernie. I don't care. Jason and Bernie need to be in the same movie, or else I swear I will put Friday the 13th in another lawsuit that ties up any future terrible projects that we're going to get after the one that we got. That is a threat.
And on that note, after threatening the studio that made this movie that we just defended,
I'm sorry. I didn't mean any of that. I didn't mean any of it. Please hire me.
I am not associated with Connor McCarthy.
Oh God, I'm getting everybody in trouble.
Yeah. No, but this has been a really great discussion, Connor. I think that we shamed a lot of people today. I think we shamed a lot of naysayers and humiliated some folk, which that's really the point of this podcast.
Yeah, and I think we established our opinion too of what our final rating of this is going to be. I think we're both on the same page here. Mm-hmm. This movie is not that bad. It's there are definitely things about it that we can see why they're criticized. At least for me, I definitely land on the not that bad category. As much as I love it, I can admit there's some faults. It is not that bad as people say it is. Would you agree, or would you say a little higher than that?
If you would have asked me a couple watches ago, I probably would have put it higher, but I'm going to go with not that bad. I think watching it now, I was struck by the fact that they didn't stick the landing on so many of the things they were going for, which is a problem. They didn't stick the landing with characters. They didn't stick the landing with tone. They didn't stick the landing with kills, and that's not their fault. They get the crucial things right. They get the main character right. They get Jason right. All the while, it's called the new blood. It feels new. So that keeps it above water for me. But I think all of these problems that we talked about, it kept knocking it down for me and taking away the rewatchability to where, it's not that bad. It's really not. I would say if you haven't seen it, I think you should give it a try.
Completely agree. And I just want to highlight how absolutely insensitive you are right there for saying keeping it above water about a movie, a franchise about a kid that drowns. So I just want to throw that out there.
Drowned. See, he survived.
No, see, here's the thing. You talked about in the last episode hating kids. Okay, you called that kid and a little shit. Okay, and a dumbass. So this is just nailing home. Gabe Tice hates children and he hates kids, and he wished Jason did drown. I heard him say it before we started recording. 100%.
Well, that would have saved a lot of lives. I mean, would you kill baby Hitler?
No, you're right. I'm teasing. I'm definitely being a dick. But
Hitler almost drowned when he was 9. Do you wish he drowned?
I do.
You can say it. It's okay.
I do.
Unless we have Nazis listening, which, by the way, if you're a Nazi, please don't listen to this.
Yeah, please. We definitely target the, I'd say 35 to 85 rich white woman demographic, but we do not target Nazis at all. So if you're a Nazi listening to this, you are not welcome. Go away.
Yeah. All right. So thanks, y'all. Thanks for listening. Keep up to date with us for more content, and see Kyle. All right, Connor, close us out.
Yeah, so thank you for listening to our podcast. This is episode 3. We love that you're sticking with us, and as you continue watching, we're definitely going to be going through some evolutions and changes. Of course, we're a new podcast, so we're going to continue to grow. Of course, our first podcast to ever make it to YouTube on video. So very, very excited to continue to grow with you guys that are watching us, and follow us on Twitter. Go like our Facebook page, interact with the show, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you find us, because we're available pretty much everywhere. So thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you in the next one.